So we're going to move to the next session. This is our event keynote. I'm really excited to introduce my friend and batchmate, Amit Walia. We go a long way back, 1995 Sera. He is the CEO of Informatica, our platinum sponsor, and he's our keynote speaker. Amit has a consistent record of driving revenue growth and operational performance improvement. He has expertise in cloud and SaaS, product management, new venture formulation, and leading large teams. So on behalf of the entire ITBHU, now IITBHU, I have to get used to that. On behalf of the entire IITBHU alumni community, I'd love to invite Amit for his continuous support and advice he's given us, and I'll invite him on stage.
After I speak, then he comes back up.
To deliver our event keynote.
I speak first? Does this work?
You speak first. I think that works, but use the mic.
I have to use this? Yeah. That's a hard one.
Okay, here.
I'm a pretty loud speaker.
Hello?
Let me just see without this. Can everybody hear me? Seriously?
No, I think.
No? This works better?
Yes, yes.
I think you have to go back and get some energy back. I know I've had, just for backup, this has been I'm glad it delayed a little bit. Last night, bunch of us, where are my batchmates? Come on, this Sarah 95, and my wife, by the way, who's the best thing I got in IITBHU. We were out late night partying, Roger Waters. A bunch of BHU guys cannot live their life without Pink Floyd. So Roger Waters was in town, we were up in San Francisco, and we were back home by 1:30 a.m. I wasn't sure how my voice will hold up, but I'm glad I did, and I'm glad everything got delayed this morning. Look, it's strange to be here in a way and talk about innovation. Because for me, a lot of people in this room are people whom we've kind of lived some pretty close, pristine moments when we were nobodies. And a bunch of people in the room have ragged me. My 94 batch, 93 batch, definitely have a strong fonding for me when I got really ragged quite a bit. So where is 94 Mech? Solanki somewhere, right? He ragged me. Where are you? Yeah, he ragged me. Man, these lights are pretty painful. I can barely see anybody. So for me, I mean, look, what I thought I'd do is, instead of spending 15-20 minutes talking about innovation, there's a lot of people in this room who've done very well. I thought I'd share with you not what the world says about it. There's a lot of books. There's a lot of famous people. There's a lot of HBR articles. There's a lot of McKinsey articles that you can read and you can learn about innovation. I'll just share with you what I think life has been in that context. And more importantly, after that, do a Q&A. I'll begin a little bit with my personal journey. If you can go to the next slide. Here it is. So look, I grew up in Lucknow, and took me a long time to drop the Lucknow Nawabiyat and the culture. As I kind of left town, and BHU for me was an amalgamation of all of India. So the tu and the word tu never came out of my word. So I learned that when I came to Banaras. But look, as I said, the best thing that happened to me when I went to Varanasi, and through all the ups and downs of life, I'm married 22 years to my batchmate from ITBHU. You want to stand up? She hates it when I do this. Trust me, 22 years of married life teaches you a lot more than anything else. We've had our love and joy, and we have 2 kids who hopefully we can take back to BHU. They've been there when they were kids. I graduated in 95, ceramics engineering, which clearly wasn't computer science. I sometimes find it ironical that after ceramics I'm here running a tech company, but that story for another day. And I went to business school here at Northwestern, 2001. And my professional journey, you can read it. I've gone through many different jobs. I think I learned the most from my first job. I worked in a steel plant. I had no idea. When a lot of people graduated and went to pretty nice offices, air-conditioned rooms, my first job was on a damn shop floor, wearing a hat in front of a blast furnace. And I still remember within 6 months in Tata Steel, you graduate from being a trainee program into basically being on the shop floor. Here I was, 20-some, early 20s, and I had 500 union labor under me, and I did not know what to do. And I also had a strike on my shop floor. And my boss, who actually was a rookie guy, and I went to him and he said, go deal with it. You screwed up, to fix it. So at 22 or 21, whatever that age was, what I learned actually has taught me a lot about life. Working with white collar professionals is very different from working with them. And that actually taught you humility, not taking yourself too seriously, and actually going to where the world is versus living in your own four walls. So that's my little journey of life. I'll go through a handful of my observations about innovation, but again, don't take it as innovation. I have no gospel of innovation. I have no patent on innovation. I just have my own learnings. So if you go to the next slide, I thought I'd take a few minutes. To me, innovation, I wanted to talk about not just in the context of business, which a lot of you probably do, but also in the context of you and I as individuals. Because to me, I think that innovation is more important because that drives innovation in companies. Again, I'll share with you what my learnings have been through my tests and trivias of life. So next slide. From an enterprise point of view, first of all, innovation. I believe, and I think all of you see that, it's amazing when we graduated in 95 and how the curve has changed in life to all of you. Some of you graduated in the 2000s. Seems like a generation later, the world has changed. Value creation from innovation has gone exponential. 20 years, 22 years ago, a company called Google was founded. So was a company called Amazon. And look today, they are some of the biggest companies on the planet. So it's pretty clear for all of us that if the value creation of innovation was linear back in our days, I think today it's exponential. Whosoever innovates actually ends up succeeding a lot more and creates a lot more value. And I think that holds true for each of us as well. That's in some ways my observation. If you go to looking at enterprises, it's kind of like, I don't have a clicker. Next slide, please. To me, there are three pillars. You've got to have a vision. Period. I don't think there is anybody in this room who probably has thought of innovation without a vision. You got to have a leadership, and to me, the most important, and I use that within my own organization, not the word execution, but the word maniacal execution. Execution outcomes strategy most of the time. That's absolutely true. There are many companies, and I can name you a few as we go along, who have not been first to market, the fastest followers. They executed flawlessly. Microsoft is a great example of that one. Microsoft, 9 out of 10 times in the last 20 years has not been an innovator. They never came with something first, but they executed like hell. Apple did not come out with the first smartphone. I remember back in the McKinsey days, Palm was one of my clients. Remember Palm, the Palm Pilot, the Trio? I worked on that conceptual design. They had the right concept of a smartphone. They just couldn't execute. And look where the smartphone world is. So to me, maniacal execution will out-trump strategy all the time. So with that context, if you go to the next slide, to me, enterprises, next slide please. It's hard to see. Three things. If you are running a business, to me, innovation comes in three dimensions. Business. Second is technology. Today's world, every company is a technology company. And the third one is people. Business is all about creating new products or services. Simple as that. In our world of tech, mostly all of you are tech. By the way, any company across the globe, if you don't have a new product or service, you're done. You are done. And second is, in that context, is creating better experience for your customers. A lot of companies who come in, sometimes even with a slightly inferior product or service, do a bang-up job of creating a great customer experience. I've seen that. Now I'll go through some examples with you. We can begin here. Take AWS. Creating a data center in the cloud probably was as innovative as it can be, but the way they brought retail mindset to technology and creating that frictionless buying experience was their biggest gift to the technology world. Apple is a great example of that one. And there are many startups that I would not even know, that I won't probably do justice talking about. And the third one is new business models. I won't speak to tech. There are more smart people in this room who know more about tech than I do. Remember, I'm a ceramics guy. I'm neither a com science guy, I'm neither an electronics guy, I'm neither an electrical guy. You know more about tech than I do, but I can tell you there's much more in tech that I can ever talk to. And the third one to me is people. I spend more time on that than anything else. I remember I was in business school. I was obviously a pretty excited business school grad, and the CEO of GE, actually Jeff Immelt, who was not the CEO, then came to my class. And Jeff Immelt that time was in the running for being the CEO. And I asked Jeff, what do you spend your time on? And he said, people. And I, in my own mind thought, what a waste. What a waste. That's exactly why these companies don't innovate. And I went to McKinsey after that, and I learned through my experiences that the most important time anybody can spend on is people. I spend almost 75% of my time on people, whether it's my own people or customers. Without actually innovating within your people landscape, no product can come out, no transformation can happen. So if I were to give you any word of advice as you scale your businesses, people. All the time. It's about creating the right mindset. It's about creating the right culture. Culture is incredibly important. Incredibly. By the way, from the starting of a startup, the culture you build, to even the largest of organizations. Without culture and focusing on people, we go nowhere. So I spend personally 75% of my own time on people. And that time is spent on helping them think through what we should be doing next. How to come up with the next probably product that we will need, or how to come up with the next particular go-to-market that we would need to scale. That's where I spend most of my time. Next slide. Innovation is everywhere. I think we have this misconception that innovation only comes from either or. I mean, the world's largest company innovates every day, Apple. At the same time, the startup that started yesterday with a seed round is innovating too. So to me, innovation happens everywhere. I mean, I'll give the example of just my own company. We are a 25-year-old company, and in the last 5 years, we've completely rebuilt our company in the cloud. We literally left every old technology behind, started from scratch, built it all by itself, and today that business in the last 6 years went from $0 to $1 billion. So it doesn't matter where innovation comes from. And that's true. We left our own legacy business behind, but at the same time, I see startups every day that go from the bold vision of actually having nothing in their hand and creating billion-dollar businesses. So to me, it is not, there is no one particular ownership of an enterprise to innovate. I don't think so, and that's truly the case. Now, if you go to the next slide, which is probably my fondest, next please, is all about people, you and I. Kind of in a way I've run my own life is how do you and I innovate? Because if you and I don't innovate, we'll be left for dead. And by the way, our own companies may not be able to innovate, and at the end of the day, we are, in aggregation, the organizations we build. First, it begins with self-awareness. I kid you not. That's the hardest thing to do. All these three things that I wrote, we and I can talk about it, we talk to our kids about every day. Self-awareness. You know, how many of you in this room who work for big companies have written your self-reviews when it comes time to the annual review cycle? Raise your hands. And how many of you have been honest in your self-reviews? Good. And that's okay. You may write whatever you want to write for your manager. The first question I ask is that if you were to look yourself in the mirror, what feedback would you give yourself? If you can't be honest and naked with your own self, you're going to go nowhere. And that's the place I find a lot of people fail. I have many senior execs who would, they think like they have changed the world, but if you have an honest conversation with them, they falter and fail. That's the harshest thing you can give yourself, self-feedback. I highly encourage everybody to do that. Not for your boss, not to please yourself, but if you could sit with your own self every 6 months and give yourself your own self-feedback and have that self-awareness of what you're actually good at, actually not good at, and what you're really going to do about it. Harshest thing. I've had many moments in my life, I tell you, I've been at crossroads. My wife knows there was a period of time where I felt like my career was going nowhere. I hit a wall. And that self-awareness of what I was not doing right was incredibly important. I remember those were some pretty difficult dark days where I was traveling a lot, my kids were young, and I wasn't sure whether I was going to make it. And I thought this was the end of my professional career, and I'm going to just pretty much cap out at a certain level. But I had to really be honest with my own self what I was doing wrong. And I tried to blame the world around me. The politics, the favoritism. Somebody else was getting it because they were not better than me, but they just had the boss that they linked up to. And the reality is all of that may be true, but sometimes that can only be no more than 10-15% of the reality. Second is skill. For sure, you need to have certain level of basic skills. One of the big conundrums in this room becomes you take the tech track or you take the business track to go up. Many of people, I went to business school myself, which by the way was the best gift I got. But many of the people I've talked to is like, hey, to grow up the corporate ladder, should I go become a techie or should I go become a business guy? By the way, the answer is nowhere. There are more people who do tech and actually become leaders. You don't need a business degree for that. Somehow there is this misconception that without that you can't succeed. You need to have your own basic set of skills to be where you want to be. If you want to be, again, I won't go into that, but there are many ways you can think about what skills you want to pick up. In some cases, they're not functional skills. They are softer skills. How do you deal with people? How do you communicate better? How do you make sure you can communicate value not of your own self, but the organizations that you lead across an organization? People sometimes think of skills, and all of us being engineers, think of raw functional skills. And as you keep growing, those matter less. The softer skills and the skills that are more roundabout around you are more critically important. That's where most of the people I generally see fail to innovate. I know that, and you know, sometimes you can just be raw, good technical skills and that can take you far, but that's going to be not all the time. And lastly, my most important one, and I'll leave you with that thought in the next slide, willpower. We were having this discussion at my home yesterday with my own friends of how far we've come. And a lot of us have started from, most of us in the room started with nothing. Like literally nothing. And the raw gumption to have that will and not settle at any time. Not that you are constantly pushing yourself out of lack of gratitude of what you have, but pushing yourself with the will of what you want to achieve is probably the most important thing in people's life. I have two kids, like all of you. Our kids grow up here and probably they get sick and tired of hearing mom and dad, and I tell them the same thing, that probably the biggest fear I have is the sense of, not the sense, but in general the privilege they have compared to what we had when we grew up. I was joking with my own son, whom I just dropped off to college. When I went to college, when I went to BHU, it was an upgrade for me. I did not have a single room to myself growing up in my home. And we got a single room to ourselves. So it was an upgrade. For him, it was a downgrade. He went from his own room, his own bathroom, his own headphones, his own everything in his room, to now sharing a room and going to a dorm bathroom. But in that world, we took our will to push ourselves somewhere. He will need his own will to push him somewhere. But without will, we will not get anywhere. So if you and I have to innovate, we got to think of these three things in our life. First, be honest with yourself. Then figure out what skills you need, and they may not be the raw technical skills in my opinion. Technical doesn't mean technical, but technical business also. And third one is, what will do we need? Where are we not being honest with ourselves, with pushing and prodding our own selves to do things that we may be thinking we are doing, but we are not? And with that, I leave you with my parting thought. If you go to the next slide, this is what I firmly believe in all the time. When I think of any one of us, I think, I mean, I'm a 2x2 person, by the way. McKinsey trained that in my head. And I think of skill and will. 2 matrices. And in my experience, at certain stage in life where we all of us are, will always outsmart skill. You gotta have basic skill, that's a given. But after that, your will always outsmart and deliver more success to you than your skill. So that's all that I had. With that, I'll just stop here and bring Jagdish back up.
Thank you, Amit. Thank you for...
Are you going to sit down?
Sage advice.
Let us stand. I don't want to sit.
Stand, sit, either one. Great. So, how are you?
I'm good. By the way, it's a small world. Jagdish, where's Murli? Murli, Jagdish and I are all neighbors. And I got to say, I mean, I've known Jagdish from, obviously, we're the same batch. We've shared hostels or not, but we've obviously been together for a long, long time.
Long time.
He's a master quiz guy. And bring back memory. And I ran into Murli, who lives in my hometown, and he will not like it, but I say I have double respect for him. Because not only is a BHU senior to me, he also went to the same business school as me. So I could never say no to Murli.
So, I know you were partying late last night, and you were, I guess, traveling the week before.
Yep.
Yes. So so how has life been? Are you back to jet setting now that the pandemic is over? Has life come back to normal in your world, or things have changed? What has changed?
Well, I hope it's not that crazy a travel that we all used to do before. We never knew anything better. No, it's been obviously the world has opened up. I mean, I was up in last 10 days. I was on the road. We had a big customer event in New York. Then I flew up to Europe. We had a big customer event there. I just came back day before yesterday, and I'm
Europe as well.
Yeah, Europe, and then I'm headed to India tomorrow actually. So the world has opened up quite a bit. But having said that, people are still not back to office as much. I don't think anybody wants to go back to office. Anybody? People are screaming, and I think so. That I think will not change that much. But in terms of generally the world opening up, I think it's pretty much opened up.
Yeah, I miss that personal connection.
I don't disagree.
That's we've always been craving to get back to that. So, let me ask you this. You took over Informatica, I believe, just before the pandemic.
I did.
Right? And then the pandemic happened, the world shut down, and you keep building it, and then you take it public last year, I believe. Yes, last year. Incredible journey. So care to share any learnings, how you navigated that? There's no playbook for it. You did it.
That, gosh, now that I remember, so Jan 2020, I've been with the company for 9 years. I took over the CEO role in Jan 2020. And I remember actually in Feb, right after that, my first trip was to India. India is our biggest office, so I ended up going to Bangalore. Then I went to Europe, and I was going, and the damn COVID thing was happening. And somebody in my office gave me one of those N95 masks, and I'm like, what am I going to do with this thing? Who wants to wear a mask? And then suddenly I come back, and in March first week we shut down everything, and within a matter of like all of us, in a week everybody's home. And I was telling my wife the other day, there's no playbook. I didn't know what to expect. My first biggest fear was, and not fear, it's bizarre. I remember I woke up in the middle of the night, and I didn't know where the world would be. I'm talking to my board, everybody's figuring out, I'm talking to a few fellow CEOs, where the business could be, would it all come to a grinding halt? But the one thing that was in my head and I did not know what to do is like, everybody's gone home. Who's taking care of the office? Strange, I just had this feeling, the office is locked. Who opens the office? Do people go home? Will they work? I mean, just kind of like, and I couldn't sleep. For at least 2-3 weeks, I was genuinely out of sleep. Didn't know what it means, and we were closing out a quarter. We had to pay people, payroll, we had to talk to customers, we had to support. I genuinely couldn't sleep for at least a couple of weeks. And then I realized that the only thing that you could do is forget that you're in the middle of a big cataclysmic event. Ultimately go down to how do you relate to people. So the thing that we did was, I went into an overdrive of communication. I would write weekly emails. I started doing like town halls, I think my team got sick and tired of communication. To the point where, we used to do quarterly all hands and give updates to the company. I used to start doing weekly emails, and people knew more about the company through those weekly emails. So as we're coming back to the normal, people miss that, and they want to go back to that a lot. So huge amount of communication. And the second one was just being empathetic with people. Just don't worry about it. We have to tell people that, if your dog is barking at the back, if your kids are crying at the back, it does not matter. That's not going to be a taboo. Just go to where everybody's life is, and we have to get used to that. We have people like young kids who come out of college who are sharing apartments in Bangalore or in Dublin or in the Bay Area. 3 people living together, all doing Zoom at the same time, and you could hear people in competing calls. We just had to stop telling people what we expected of them and go down to where they were, and it kind of really helped us. We actually had incredible amount of employee engagement during that time.
That's great to hear. And what about the roadshow? How did you have to be in the street?
All virtual. We did the whole IPO virtually. In fact, my first business travel was for the IPO to New York, but the whole roadshow we did virtually over Zoom, which I think was better. I could talk to like hundreds of investors on the damn Zoom call versus go to New York and you get in a car and you go meet hundreds of investors. I would be tired by that time. So the first business travel that I did after the pandemic was in New York for the IPO. And I'll tell you this funny story. I think we invited all the leadership team over there, like 100 of our senior leaders. After the IPO, we went to this Michelin 3-star French restaurant.
Yeah.
I have never seen people, like these are the top leaders and my board, stand up on chair and dance after a great drink. That was the best thing people had.
Phenomenal. So for those of you trying to build up and take a company public, now you have a playbook. Come back on the playbook.
Happy to tell you. There are a few bankers in this room. I can tell you behind the scenes what happens.
So before I open up to a couple of questions from the audience, I want to tell a little bit of a secret of Amit here. We talked so much about the people first approach. Did you know that this guy has a 96% CEO approval on Glassdoor? Kudos. Congrats. So I'll open up for some audience questions. Yes, Tushar.
Can I get a mic?
Yeah. We have an extra.
Tushar over there, behind you. I've known Tushar for a long time. Don't ask me a hard question, Tushar. Right behind you.
I mean, first, thanks for coming very interested. I'm doing it 28 years. I'm sad I'm going to a startup, but I've worked with senior leaders, and I'm trying to enter a mental level of success. I mean, with your those countries, very tough. One thing we should fundamental skills will resonate. I want to ask you something which a lot of us have been thinking in the BHU days. I mean, what is it now? You used to walk in over the BHU, and now people start gathering in everything. Even when you go to a position, any favors are for you, whether it's a gentle corner or probably the idea of working. How does it work now? I have a very specific copy of IDA before this comes in next year. When every office would analyze people, not many people turn up. And then, what is that? It's been 28 years I've been trying to think. First time I went to 94 September, morning of the important groups, campaign, you become the mayor. How does it work? What is the secret there? Scaling success will be understand in the career. But you want to hear that, it has been 30 years of studying about it. How do you relate?
So 31 years before we started, actually, you reminded me of time. In fact, dating ourselves, but those are, I think I've just been lucky and fortunate. I've had great friends. My ceramic friends are sitting over there. Every time we started a journey, I just had some incredible amount of close friends, whether it was across every branch. I think ultimately, if you're vulnerable and honest, I think people kind of see through you. I have many stories in my life, including BHU days where there was difficult days, but I think the honesty, if you're just being honest with people, if you're struggling and if you need their help, genuinely, people actually see through it. I remember when we were running Spandan, it was a hard one, and in our time we raised the highest amount of money because we just had a bunch of believers, and I believe in that word quite a bit, who were just like, it was our collective cause. I mean, whether it was through metallurgy, com science, chemical, each and every branch was part of that one, and I think just being honest and being vulnerable to some extent, people see through you. If you're trying to paint a picture, people will also see through you.
Thank you. I guess we have time for one more question. Anybody else?
Mr. Olia, my name is Gopal. I graduated from Metallurgy in 1990.
There is hope for ceramics and metallurgy. We do well.
So, as I'm wrapping up grad school, I'm at a place where people in your position will be evaluating me. And so I wanted to know, because you kept talking about innovation in the people landscape, so how do you assess someone's capacity for innovating in that landscape? Because for things like technology, there are very hard markets.
I think how people show up. I think, of course, the reason I'm a little bit flippant about skill is that, of course, you have to have a basic set of skills. I mean, if you're an entry-level job and you're supposed to be doing programming, if you can't code, like, that's tough. So, how you show up, the attitude you bring to the table. And I think one of my gripes is that people get very quickly expecting. Don't expect, give. Put in your 200%, it'll show up. By the way, if it doesn't show up at the place where you are, leave the place and go somewhere else. But bring your best, have the attitude of just showing up with enthusiasm, giving in your 200%. And by the way, you're going to learn your own life skills very quickly. The first 5 years of your life are extremely formative. I suggest stop expecting and expect a lot of yourself. Don't worry about your surroundings. Give. If the surrounding does not help you become something bigger than you are, leave. But bring the best. How people show up matters so much, and people underestimate that.
Well said, well said. Let's give it up for Amit Walia once more.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And go 1995.
Go 1995. Yes. How many 1995 do we do? All right. Thank you all. Take care.